Winter has a way of swallowing sound. Out there, deep in the forests of Washington, the silence felt heavier, like the snow itself was pressing down on the world, muffling everything beneath its weight. Lucas and I had been driving for hours, no real plan, just the road stretching ahead of us, winding through endless pines and snow-covered hills. The kind of place where radio stations fade to static and you start to hear your own thoughts a little too loudly. Lucas was in the passenger seat, flipping through his phone even though we hadn't had a signal in over an hour. Man, I swear, these roads feel like they go nowhere. That's the point, I said, gripping the wheel. No traffic, no people, just... And then I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, just a mound of snow on the side of the road, maybe a buried mailbox or a tree stump. But as we got closer, my stomach clenched. It was a snowman. Not some lumpy kid-med thing either. This one was perfect. 3 smooth spheres stacked neatly, with a carrot nose, 2 lumps of coal for eyes, and a deep red scarf wrapped tight around its neck. Lucas noticed it at the same time. Dude, what the hell? I slowed the car. The snow was fresh, untouched. No footprints, no tracks, just that thing, standing alone in the middle of nowhere. You want to check it out? I asked. Lucas gave me a side eye. You ever seen any horror movie? This is how people die. I laughed, but there was a tightness in my chest. Something about it felt off. I pulled the car to the side of the road, engine idling. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped out. The cold hit me like a slap, the kind that gets deep into your bones. Lucas stayed in the car, rolling the window down just enough to talk. $5 says it's a prank. I ignored him, moving closer. The scarf looked expensive. Real wool, no frayed edges, like someone had just wrapped it there. I reached out, hesitating for a second, then touched it. The snowman was ice cold, harder than it should have been, like it had been frozen solid for years. A strange smell lingered in the air, something sharp beneath the crispness of the snow. Not rotten, not chemical, just... wrong. And then Lucas hissed my name. Ethan, get back in the car. I turned. His face had gone pale, eyes locked on the trees behind me. Slowly, I looked over my shoulder. A figure stood in the tree line, tall, motionless, watching. The shadows made it hard to see details, but I caught glimpses. Dark clothing, the gleam of something metallic in one hand. A goddamn axe. I took a step back. The snowman's eyes seemed to bore into me, unblinking. Lucas was already reaching over to yank open my door. Ethan, move! The figure stepped forward, slow at first, then faster. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned and ran, snow slipping beneath my boots. The moment my hand hit the car door, I heard it. A deep, rasping breath behind me, too close. I threw myself inside, yanking the door shut. Lucas was already shouting, "Go, go, go!" The tires spun on the icy road before catching, and we shot forward, fishtailing. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The figure was running. No, sprinting. Through knee-deep snow, somehow keeping pace. Lucas swore, hands braced against the dashboard. He's still coming. What the hell? I pushed the gas pedal to the floor. The car roared, the road a blur beneath us. The speedometer climbed. 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. Still, he ran. I could barely process it. No human should be able to move like that, not in this terrain. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he stopped. 1 second he was there, closing in on us. The next he simply vanished. Lucas and I didn't speak for a while. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, breath coming in short gasps. Finally, he broke the silence. We're not stopping again. I don't care if Bigfoot himself waves us down. I nodded, eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. The woods stretched on, dark and endless, but I knew he was still out there, watching. It took another 20 minutes before we spotted a ranger station. The lights were a godsend, cutting through the night like a beacon. I pulled into the lot, the car barely in park before we stumbled inside. The ranger on duty, a middle-aged guy with a thick beard and tired eyes, looked up from his desk. "You boys lost?" Lucas and I exchanged glances. "There was someone out there," I said. "He had an axe. He chased us." The ranger's expression darkened. "Where?" "About 15 miles back, near this." "Snowman." That made him pause. You said a snowman? Something about the way he asked made my skin crawl. Yeah, just one. It was standing by the road, all perfect like someone placed it there. Why? The ranger exhaled slowly, then stood. Come on, let's take a drive. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed stay put, but I needed to know. Lucas stayed behind while the ranger and I drove back. The ride felt longer this time, the silence stretching too thin. Then we reached the spot. No figure. No tracks. But the snowman was still there. Only now, its scarf was gone, and in its frozen stick fingers, it clutched something new, a torn strip of blue fabric. From my jacket. A cold sweat prickled my skin. The ranger shifted in his seat, jaw tight. You said he chased you, right? But you never saw his face? I shook my head. The ranger exhaled through his nose, drumming his fingers against the wheel. Yay. We get reports like this sometimes. Not often, just every few years. I swallowed hard. What is he? The ranger didn't answer right away. He just put the car in reverse, shaking his head. Let's get you boys the hell out of here. We never talked about it again. Never found out if they caught him or if he was even real in the way people usually mean. But sometimes, when winter rolls in and the roads go quiet, I think about that snowman, about the man in the trees, and I wonder if he's still waiting. You'd think after what happened on that highway with the snowman, I'd swear off road trips forever. But life's funny like that. A couple of months later, I found myself driving through another icy stretch of nowhere, this time with my niece, Mia. I wasn't planning on a road trip, but when my sister called last week, begging me to pick Mia up from her campus in Montana after her ride bailed, I couldn't say no. Family's family, even if your hands still shake a little from memories you'd rather forget. The weather was bitter, one of those late winter nights where the cold doesn't just nip at you, it sinks its teeth into your bones. Route 212 was a frozen ribbon cutting through Montana's vast emptiness, the kind of place where the sky is so dark it feels like you're driving straight through the belly of the night. Mia sat next to me, headphones on, lost in her phone. The dashboard glow made her look younger than 17. She had my sister's eyes, bright, full of life. I was glad she couldn't see my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. Uncle David? She suddenly said, pulling out an earbud. You okay? You're quiet. I forced a smile. Just remembering why I hate driving in the snow. She gave a soft laugh. Well, I'd rather be here than on a Greyhound with a bunch of weirdos. I smiled back. But something gnawed at me. It was too damn quiet out here. No headlights behind us, no taillights ahead, just miles and miles of nothing. Then we saw her, a figure on the roadside, barely visible against the snowdrifts. She wasn't walking, more like staggering, one arm wrapped around herself, the other waving feebly. Mia sat up straight. Oh my God, Uncle David, she needs help. My foot hovered over the brake. I didn't answer right away. A sour knot twisted in my gut. I remembered Washington. I remembered the snowman and the man with the axe. But this was different, right? She was alone. Mia's voice sharpened. David, we can't just leave her. I swore under my breath and eased the car onto the shoulder. The window fogged from our breath as I rolled it down. The cold poured in, sharp and merciless. Hey, I called. You okay? The woman looked up. She was young, early 20s maybe. Long dark hair half frozen to her pale face. Her lips were cracked, her eyes wide and hollow. Her clothes weren't right for the weather, a thin jacket, ripped jeans. She shivered so hard I could hear her teeth chattering. Please, she rasped. I just need to get away from him. Mia's hand was already on the door handle. Let her in. Something felt off. My instincts screamed at me to keep driving, but Mia's eyes, they were pleading. Get in, I said tightly. The woman stumbled into the back seat, curling into herself for warmth. She smelled like sweat and something metallic beneath it. Blood, maybe. Mia turned to her, voice soft. Hey, you're safe now. What's your name? The woman's eyes flicked to the window, to the dark forest beyond. Cora, she whispered. Her voice was raw, cracked. He's still out there. I felt the cold creep up my spine. Who's out there? Her eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, wide, glassy, and wild. He won't stop. A sharp crack broke the silence. Somewhere in the woods, a tree branch snapping, maybe. Or something bigger. I hit the gas. The road stretched on, endless and empty. The only sounds were the hum of the heater and Mia's voice trying to soothe Cora. But Cora barely spoke. She kept her head down, fingers digging into the seatbelt like it was the only thing tethering her to life. And then I saw it. The passenger side mirror flashed something. A figure far behind us on the road. Too far for details, but running. No car, no headlights, just running. I pressed the accelerator harder. Mia noticed my tension. "David, what's wrong?" I shook my head. "Nothing, just keeping ahead of the weather." But Cora knew. Without lifting her eyes, she whispered, "You can't outrun him." The road blurred under the headlights. The world outside was a frozen void, but inside the car the air felt tighter, colder somehow, even with the heater blasting. Mia tried again. "Cora, who's after you?" Cora's voice was a thread of breath. "He doesn't want me, he wants you." My stomach turned to stone. What the hell does that mean? Suddenly there was a click. I glanced down. Cora's hand had slipped beneath her coat and come back out with a hunting knife. "Pull over," she said, her voice low and flat. All the fear was gone. Mia gasped, her back pressing into the door. "Cora, what?" "Shut up." The knife was steady, inches from Mia's throat. "Don't be stupid," I said, my voice tight. My knuckles turned white on the wheel. "What do you want?" Her cracked lips curled into something cold. "Your car. Your money. And if you're smart, you'll let me leave without painting these seats red." Mia's voice broke. You lied." Cora's eyes, hollow and empty, flicked to Mia. "It's just survival, sweetheart. People die out here all the time, freezes them solid, makes the search easy, the evidence clean." My pulse roared in my ears. I knew this kind of evil, I'd seen it, but Mia was still a kid, and I wasn't losing her to this, I didn't think. I acted. With a hard yank, I swerved the car, sending us skidding. The tires screamed, the world tilted. Cora shrieked, slamming into the door. The car hit the ditch with a bone-rattling crash, and everything exploded into chaos. My vision swam. The windshield was cracked, snow swirled in through the busted window. Beside me, Mia coughed, dazed but breathing, and in the back seat, so was I. I found her near the tree line, limping, one hand pressed to her ribs. "Cora!" I bellowed. She whipped around, knife flashing. But she wasn't fast enough. I unleashed the spray. Her scream tore through the night, raw and ragged as she clawed at her burning eyes, the knife falling to the snow with a dull thunk. Mia's voice pierced the air behind me. "Uncle David!" I turned and froze. The trees beyond her, a shape. Huge. Silent, eyes glowing. Watching. Mia saw it too. Her voice cracked with panic. "Run!" We ran. Branches whipped at my face. My chest burned, but we ran. The sound behind us, deep, thundering steps, too heavy for a man, too fast for a beast, chased us, closing the distance. Then, the road, the headlights of our wrecked car, the radio, somehow still on, crackling, and a voice through the static. "Run," he watches, always. I didn't stop. Mia didn't stop. But Cora, her screams stopped. We made it back to the road just as sirens split the night. The cops found Cora, or what was left of her. Her body was frozen solid, her face contorted in terror. They called it hypothermia, but I knew better. I knew what was out there. When the sheriff took my statement, he frowned hard at one detail. "You said she got in your car," he said slowly. "Yeah," I rasped. He looked back at my car, at the rear passenger seat, drenched, not in blood, but in melted snow. Me and I made it out, but the cold never left me, and neither did the feeling that someone was still watching. They say after something terrifying happens to you on the road, you never drive the same way again. You start to see every empty stretch of highway as a trap, every roadside stranger as a threat. But the thing is, some threats aren't on the road, they are the road. If you've been with us so far, you know the stories. Ethan and Lucas found out the hard way that even a snowman can be a warning. David and Mia learned that the most dangerous passengers aren't always the ones you invite. But this next story? It's about a road that takes more than just your time. Emily and I weren't supposed to be out that late. The plan was simple. Leave DC early, cross through West Virginia, and stop in Charleston for the night. But plans never survive road trips, and ours was no exception. First the traffic, then the flat tire. By the time we hit the West Virginia border, it was nearly midnight, and the fog had rolled in thick, smothering the road in a soupy haze. Emily, my girlfriend, sat beside me, her phone's GPS glowing uselessly. "Signal's dead again," she muttered. "I told you we should have stayed on the interstate." I sighed, gripping the wheel. "I know, but the GPS said this was faster." "Yeah, well," she said, peering into the fog, "fast doesn't matter if we drive off a cliff." The road narrowed, hemmed in by towering trees whose branches stretched out like bony fingers. The headlights barely cut through the mist, making everything ahead shapeless and shifting. Then we saw it, a small, run-down gas station. Its sign flickered weakly, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked pavement. I pulled in without thinking. We could use a break, and maybe someone inside could tell us if we were still on the right track. The place was almost empty. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and motor oil. At the counter sat an old man, gaunt, with a face carved from leather, and eyes that seemed to see too much. His name tag read Roy. He watched us enter, his gaze heavy. "Long way from home," he rasped. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Trying to get to Charleston. GPS is dead." Roy didn't blink. "Charleston, huh? Long drive? Especially this late?" Emily rubbed her arms. "Yeah, we kinda got lost." The old man's eyes flicked to the fogged windows. "The main highway's slow this time of night. Tourists, construction." But his voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. "There's a back road. Hollowbrook Road. Cuts straight through the hills. You'll save an hour." Emily tensed. "I don't know. Shortcut through the woods? Sounds like a horror movie setup." Roy chuckled. A dry, hollow sound. "Ain't nothing scary on Hollowbrook. Just a quiet drive. No traffic. No fuss." I glanced at Emily. She was giving me that absolutely not look. But I was tired. The road had beaten us down, and I wanted a bed. "You sure it's safe?" I asked. The old man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Safe as anywhere." We shouldn't have gone, but we did. Hollowbrook Road felt like it belonged in another time. The asphalt was cracked and worn, the trees pressed in tight, and the fog, it felt thicker here, like it was alive. Emily's voice was a thread of unease. "Dylan, this doesn't feel right." I gripped the wheel. "I know, but he said it was faster." She stared out the window. "That guy gave me the creeps." I didn't say it, but something about Roy had felt off, like he knew something he wasn't telling us. Then, out of nowhere, the radio crackled. We hadn't touched it, the screen was off, but a faint voice buzzed through the static. "Stay away." Emily sat bolt upright. "What was that?" I fiddled with the dial. Nothing. Just more static. The road curved ahead, disappearing into the fog. My knuckles tightened on the wheel. Then we saw them. They stood in the middle of the road, a group of people. At least a dozen, men, women, and children, all perfectly still. My heart slammed into my throat. "What the hell?" Emily gasped, her hand on my arm. "Dylan, stop!" I hit the brakes hard. The car screeched to a stop, just feet from the nearest figure. They didn't move, they didn't flinch, they just stood there. Their faces blank, emotionless, their clothes thin summer clothes, no jackets, no shoes, but it was freezing. The fog swirled around them, but they stayed perfectly visible, as though the mist dared not touch them. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "They're freezing. Why aren't they shaking?" The group's eyes were all wrong, glazed, empty, and they weren't looking at us, they were looking past us, into the trees. Then their mouths moved. No sound came out. No scream, no whisper, just the slow, synchronized movement of lips. Chanting. Silent. Emily was trembling. "Dylan, they're not okay, let's go, let's go!" I threw the car into reverse, but my heart stopped. Behind us. More of them, they had come from the trees. We were surrounded. Their lips kept moving, whispering something we couldn't hear. Emily's panic broke. She screamed. "Go!" I floored it. The car surged forward, toward the group. "Dylan!" she shrieked. But I couldn't stop. We had to get through. The impact never came. The car passed through them like they weren't there. A coldness, unnatural, bone deep, washed through the car, seeping into my skin, into my lungs. The windows fogged from the inside with frost so thick we couldn't see. Then the windshield. One word, etched in frost by an invisible hand. Joy. I couldn't breathe. The wheel felt like ice under my hands. Emily clawed at the windshield. What the hell is this?" The radio snapped back on, a voice, ours, echoing from the static. "Don't stop. Don't look back. Just..." A scream. Emily's scream, cut through the recording. My blood ran cold. The road ahead twisted. And then we saw her. A woman, standing alone in the fog. Her face pale, eyes wide with terror. She was waving her arms. "Stop!" she mouthed, though we heard nothing. Her face. It was Emily. My head spun. No, what is this? Emily beside me went rigid, her eyes locked on her own doppelganger. "Dylan, what?" The other Emily's mouth opened, and this time we heard her. Clear, cutting through the static. "He's behind you," the passenger window. A shape, a face pressed against the glass, gray, sunken, its mouth stretched into a smile too wide, its eyes empty, endless, wrong. I screamed. I don't remember hitting the gas. I don't remember how we got out. But suddenly, we were flying down the road, the fog thinning, the trees breaking. The gas station. I slammed the brakes. It was Roy's station. But it wasn't run down anymore. It was abandoned, windows shattered, weeds clawing through cracks in the pavement, the sign dark and broken. The pump showed a price that hadn't existed since the 80s. The building looked like it had been dead for decades. Emily grabbed my arm, her voice shaking. "Dylan, what is this?" The door to the station stood open, and inside, the counter, the old chair, but no Roy, just a mirror. A tall, cracked mirror, and in it, us. But behind us, the figures. All of them. Their mouths still moving, but this time, we heard the whisper. "Now you know the way. Bring them, bring more. Join." We ran. We didn't stop until we hit the interstate. But the road signs, they were wrong. No Hollowbrook Road, no gas station, like none of it had ever existed. But we know better, and every winter, when the fog creeps in, we hear them, their lips still moving. You've stayed with us this far, and by now you know the roads we travel aren't always what they seem. Ethan and Lucas learned that the hard way when they found the snowman that shouldn't have been there. David and Mia picked up a passenger who was far more than she appeared. And Dylan and Emily, well, they found out that some roads aren't shortcuts, they're traps. But tonight's story is different, because sometimes the danger isn't on the road, it's where you stop. I've been driving trucks for 20 years, seen every stretch of highway, every roadside diner, every greasy spoon that keeps the wheels turning. And I've learned one thing: some places, they remember you. This is about one of those places. Max was my only company. My old mutt, part shepherd, part who knows what. Loyal, quiet. He'd been with me through 100,000 miles of bad weather and long nights. That night, we were cutting across Idaho on I-90. The run was behind schedule, typical, and I'd been pushing through the dark for hours. My eyes burned from the glare of the headlights, and the coffee in my thermos had gone cold. Max stirred from the passenger seat, ears twitching. He always knew when I was getting tired. All right, I muttered. "We'll stop." The next exit promised a rest area, and I took it. Gravel crunched beneath the wheels as I pulled in. The sign overhead read, "Rest Stop 13." The place looked wrong. The building was old, older than it should have been. The windows were dark, the vending machines dead, and the lot empty. No semis, no cars, no RVs, just us. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt heavy, thick. Max sat up, his ears stiff. A low growl rumbled in his chest. That wasn't like him. "Easy, boy," I said, forcing a chuckle. "Just a quick break." I grabbed my thermos and stepped out. The cold hit hard, too sharp for spring. My breath fogged instantly, hanging in the air longer than it should. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered, their glow pale and sickly. Somewhere in the trees beyond the lot, a branch snapped, loud. Max barked, his paws pressed against the window. I felt it then, the watching, like the building itself had eyes, but truckers don't get far by spooking easy. So I gave Max a reassuring tap on the glass. "Be right back, bud." The door to the restroom groaned open and I stepped inside. The air was wrong. Stale, cold, and thick with the faint smell of mildew. Fluorescent lights flickered above, buzzing like angry insects. The floor was cracked tile and the walls, old green stalls, were lined with mirrors. So many mirrors, too many for a rest stop. Most places have a line of sinks and a single mirror above them. But here, the whole far wall was glass. I caught my reflection, a tired woman with a trucker's cap pulled low, a thermos in hand. Max wasn't with me, but in the mirror, he was. I froze. He sat right behind me, ears perked, eyes fixed on mine, but he wasn't there. I turned, nothing. The stall doors hung open and empty, but in the reflection, Max stood up. His ears flattened, his body tensed, and he was staring at something behind me. I whipped around, nothing. My pulse pounded, cold sweat prickling the back of my neck. "Max," I called, my voice cracking. The mirror answered. His lips curled into a silent snarl, hackles raised, and then, in the last stall, a shape. A pale, white hand gripped the edge of the door. My blood turned to ice. The hand slid downward, fingers scraping against the tile with a sound that cut through the buzzing lights. The stall door opened. Nothing inside. But the air grew colder. The lights flickered, once, twice, then darkness. In the black, I heard it, a whisper. So close it felt like breath on my neck. "Stay." The lights flared back on, and the mirror, my reflection, was smiling. I wasn't, but it was. I bolted. I hit the door, shoving it open so hard it slammed into the wall. Outside, the lot was empty, but my truck, the headlights were on, and Max was gone. I sprinted to the cab, yanked the door open. The engine idled, the seat warm, like I'd never left. But no sign of Max. Then, a sound. Faint. Scratching. From inside the dashboard. I stared, my hands trembling. Max? The radio crackled to life. Not music, but his whimpering. I lost it. I tore at the dashboard, ripping the panel open. Nothing. But behind the plastic, the vents. Frost. I screamed his name, my voice raw, and then the windshield. A word etched into the frost. Mirror. I turned, the rest stop's window, my reflection, and Max inside it. He was there, trapped, his paws scratched against the glass, his eyes pleading. And behind him, that pale, hollow-eyed, crawling closer, its face, my face. I didn't think, I ran. My boots hit the asphalt hard, each breath burning in my chest. I reached the building's glass wall, and I hit it. The impact cracked the mirror, spiderweb fractures spreading across its surface. Inside, Max barked, his voice muffled, desperate. I slammed my fists against the glass. "Give him back." The figure smiled, my smile, and whispered, "Trade." I didn't hesitate. I threw my fist into the mirror. The glass exploded, 1,000 shards. Pain seared up my arm as the world folded. I woke up in the cab, Dawn, the engine off. My knuckles, bloody and torn. The rest stop, gone. Just trees. No building, no sign, nothing. Then, a sound. A soft thump. The passenger seat. Max. Alive. Whole. His eyes met mine, and he was afraid of me. I caught my reflection in the side mirror, but it wasn't right. My eyes slightly off. And when I smiled, the reflection smiled first. You've heard the story so far. Ethan and Lucas ran from something that shouldn't have been human. David and Mia survived a passenger who wasn't what she seemed. Dylan and Emily took a shortcut that never ended. And Jamie? Well, Jamie made a trade no one should ever make. But sometimes, the road doesn't chase you, it waits. And when it finds you, it makes sure you never leave. I hadn't planned on stopping. I was running on fumes, both in my car and my body, but I wanted to push through to Flagstaff just another couple hours. But my sister, Zoe, kept yawning in the passenger seat, and I couldn't risk falling asleep at the wheel. All right, I sighed, my voice rough from the road. Next place we see, we stop, Zoe mumbled, half asleep. About time. The road ahead stretched black and empty, no signs, no gas stations, nothing but desert and stars. Then, like it heard us, the sign appeared. Pine Ridge Motel, vacancy, next exit. The place was a skeleton of a motel. One story, cracked neon sign, faint hum from a buzzing vacancy light that flickered like it didn't want to be on. It felt like it hadn't seen life in years. But the office light was on. Inside, the clerk sat behind the counter. He looked wrong. Thin, too thin, like his skin barely clung to his bones. His eyes, sunken and dull, tracked me with an unsettling slowness. His name tag said Reed, but the plastic was cracked and faded like it had been worn for decades. We need a room, I said, pulling out my card. Just for the night. The man's lips cracked into something that wasn't quite a smile. Only one room left. His voice sounded dry, dusty. He slid the key across the counter, an old brass key, not a card. The tag read, Room 7 Zoe, standing behind me, frowned. Seriously? What is this, 1,975? Reed's voice rasped. No other rooms, you'll be comfortable. The way he said it, it wasn't a promise. It was a warning. Room 7 smelled like time had rotted inside it, the carpet stained and stiff. The walls, yellowed with age, the bed, one, single, with sheets that looked clean but felt wrong. The only light came from a crusty old lamp with a shade tilted at an odd angle. Zoe wrinkled her nose. God, this is nasty. I tossed my bag onto the bed, trying to shake off the unease. One night, we'll be gone before sunrise. But the room, it felt like it was waiting. The bathroom mirror was cracked, but the crack didn't follow the glass. It curved, unnaturally, like a smile, and the closet door was shut. But from beneath it came a sound. Soft, scratch, scratch, scratch. Zoe heard it too. Trevor, what the hell is that? I tried the handle, locked. Probably a raccoon or something. Suddenly, thunk, something hit the inside of the closet. Zoe jumped back, her face pale. We're leaving, right now. I turned toward the door and froze. The lock. It was gone. Not broken, not jammed, just gone. Like there had never been a lock. Zoe's voice shook. Trevor? The scratching from the closet changed. It became tapping. Knock, 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 and then a whisper. Muffled, but from inside the closet. Let me out. My blood turned cold. Who's there? I demanded, my voice hoarse. The whisper came again, soft, but Trevor. I felt the room tilt, my chest tightened. Zoe, get behind me. But when I turned, Zoe wasn't there. The room was wrong. The bed, gone. The door, gone. The windows, black like the outside world had never existed, just the cracked mirror and the closet. The whisper again, but this time it was Zoe's voice. "Trevor, help me!" I lost it. I ran to the closet, pounding on the door. "Zoe, I'm here!" The voice, muffled, pleading. "Trevor, it's cold, please!" My hands hit the wood, and the closet door dissolved, like water rippling away, leaving only the mirror. And in it, Zoe. But not right. Her face was pale, her lips blue. She pounded on the glass, her eyes wide with terror. "Trevor," she screamed, her voice clear, real. "It's behind you, the mirror." Suddenly reflected something that wasn't there. A shape, tall, with long clawed hands. Its face. No, it wasn't a face. It was mine. But wrong. Twisted, grinning, eyes black as pits. I spun, nothing behind me, but the reflection. The thing. It didn't turn with me, it moved on its own. And it reached out. I screamed as the thing punched through the glass. The mirror exploded, shards flying, but instead of breaking, the shards pulled me in. I landed hard, but not in the room, somewhere else. The walls, glass, every direction, endless mirrors, and in them, me. 1,000 wrong versions of me. But none of them were moving with me. They watched, smiling, their mouths moving in unison. And I heard them, "She's ours now." I spun and saw Zoe. On the other side of the glass, her fists slamming against it, her mouth screaming, but I couldn't hear her because the glass was between us. Then something grabbed me. The thing, me, dragged me backward, its grin splitting wide. "Trade," it whispered, and I felt myself vanish. The next morning, the motel manager found room 7, door wide open, no sign of a struggle. The room, empty. No Trevor, no Zoe. But in the mirror, 2 silhouettes, a man and a woman, trapped, frozen, their mouths open in a scream that never ends. By now, you've traveled every road with us. You stood with Ethan and Lucas in the snow as something inhuman chased them. You felt David and Mia's terror when Cora pulled the knife. You followed Dylan and Emily into the fog where something waited in silence. You watched Jamie vanish into the glass, leaving only her reflection behind. You screamed with Trevor and Zoe when room 7 swallowed them whole. But not every terror waits behind a door or on the road. Some creep through the airwaves, through signals, through whispers, until they find you. Nate and I had always chased the unknown through static and frequencies. Most people didn't get it. Why we spent weekends chasing number stations and ghost signals on my old Hammerland SP600. But that night, the unknown found us first. The radio had been humming softly for hours, the familiar crackle of static like a lullaby. I was spinning the dial, chasing whispers in the air when it broke through. Faint, but unmistakable. A voice. My voice. "Nate? Riley?" I froze, my blood running cold. Nate's head snapped up from his phone. "Was that?" My hand trembled on the dial. "That was me." The signal, warped but clear, broke through again. "Don't come here." My chest tightened, my throat dry. The voice wasn't a recording, it wasn't a clip. It was me. Speaking from somewhere I hadn't been, a burst of static followed, sharp and painful, then another voice, Nate's. "Riley, run!" The speakers screamed with a shriek of feedback that made us both flinch. Then silence, thick and smothering. Nate's voice, tight with panic, broke it. "That was us, but how?" I stared at the radio's display. Coordinates, a location. Something in my gut twisted, a warning, but I already knew what we had to do. The coordinates led us deep into New Mexico, down a forgotten stretch of Route 66 where the road cracked and peeled from the earth like old skin. The night pressed down heavy, the desert stars too sharp, the world too still. Then, through the dark, we saw it. The tower. An old broadcasting mast, rusted and skeletal against the sky, its dish cracked, cables hanging like exposed nerves. The air felt wrong here, too thick to breathe, and beneath the hum of the desert night there was something else, a vibration, not heard but felt. The signal was alive. As we stepped from the car, the dashboard speakers flickered on with our voices. "Riley, don't." Nate's voice was tight. "Riley, this is a mistake." But I was already walking toward the door. "We need to know." The entrance yawned open, rusted metal hanging from broken hinges. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of earth and ozone. Old equipment, radios, reel-to-reels, lined the room, their dials flickering faintly, machines decades dead but somehow alive. Reels spun on dusty players, monitors glowed, feeding nothing but static. A tape began to play, our voices, our words. "We shouldn't be here, Riley," Nate's voice shaking, then mine. "We need to know." The hiss thickened, the tape whining. "Riley!" The sound that followed was pure agony. Our screams. The tape clicked off. Nate's voice, barely a whisper behind me. "Riley, this is wrong." And I turned. But he was gone. My heart slammed in my chest. "Nate!" My voice echoed against the walls, swallowed by static. The machines all surged at once, speakers vomiting a chorus of voices, male, female, old, young, layered into a grotesque harmony. "We have him." The monitors flared to life, and through the fractured glass. I saw Trevor, his voice broken and desperate, rattled from the speakers. "If you hear this, don't follow the signal, don't listen. It repeats, it take you." His face vanished in a burst of static. A new voice, hollow and raw. "Jamie." He didn't listen. I staggered back, ice flooding my veins. The room, the signal. It wasn't just taking broadcasts. It was taking people. Ethan, Lucas, David, Mia, Dylan, Emily, Trevor, Jamie, now Nate, and I had led us straight into it. A screen to my right flickered and my blood turned to ice. Nate, trapped. Behind glass, his fists pounding, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear him. The signal drowned him. "Nate!" I screamed, my voice raw and useless. The speakers hissed in reply. "We have him! We have you!" The static surged into a wall of sound, pressing on my skull until I thought it would crack. Through it rose a final voice. My own. "Too late, Riley. You're part of it now." The air collapsed, folding around me, and I felt myself falling? No, transmitting. The world dissolved into pure signal. I woke up in my garage, my radio silent, the room dead still. But something was wrong. The air was colder, the light flatter. I spun to the radio, my fingers shaking, and it spoke. "Nate, Riley, don't come here." The broadcast was starting without me. I turned, and in the mirror, Nate, his palms on the glass, his mouth screaming soundlessly. I reached for him, my throat raw with a scream of his name, and he smiled. The radio flared to life, looping the signal, my voice over and over, trapping me in a broadcast that never ended. "You've traveled every road, seen every room, heard every signal, but now you understand. The stories were never about them, they were about you. Because some signals never stop, some stories never end. And you're already part of the broadcast. The vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, if you can still hear us, the road, the room, the broadcast, they're still waiting." It's still waiting. Thank you for journeying with us through these 6 chilling tales from Enigma of the Unknown. Each story was more than just a fright. It was a warning, a reflection of the choices we make and the dangers that often lurk where we least expect. As the storyteller behind these horrors, let me share with you what I believe we can learn from those who didn't make it out, or worse. Though from Ethan and Lucas in The Frostwatcher, we learned that curiosity can kill more than the cat. It can kill your way out. The world is full of strange sights and unanswered mysteries, but some things are best left undisturbed. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts. Not every picture is worth taking, and not every picture leads to discovery. David and Mia's terror in Passenger of the Dead reminds us that kindness can be a double-edged blade. Helping strangers is human, but so is survival. Always listen to your gut. It often knows danger before your mind catches up. And sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who ask for a ride. Dylan and Emily's encounter in the gathering at Hollowbrook Road teaches us the cost of ignoring red flags, especially from someone who claims to be helping you. Shortcuts are often traps. If you ever feel the road stretching too long, too quiet, too empty, turn around. Jamie's fate in Rest Stop 13 warns us about isolation. Rest stops, empty rooms, and silent places. These are the hunting grounds of the unknown. Never assume you're alone, and always trust what the mirror shows you, especially if it shows you something it shouldn't. Trevor and Zoe's nightmare in Motel Room 7 is a stark reminder that warnings exist for a reason. When someone tells you don't go in, don't. It's not just about locked doors. It's about knowing that some places take more than your sleep. They take you. Finally, from Riley and Nate's horror in The Last Signal, we learn that chasing answers can cost more than ignorance. Some mysteries want to be found, and when they find you, there's no tuning out. So, my advice to you, never ignore the shiver in your spine. Respect the silence. It often hides something waiting to break it. Don't be too quick to help the lost, because they may not be the ones who are truly lost. And most importantly, when something calls your name from the dark, don't answer. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining Enigma of the Unknown. Your time, your chills, and your courage to face the darkness with us mean everything. If these stories have kept you awake, good. If they've made you think twice before taking a shortcut, picking up a stranger, or entering an empty room, even better. And if you hear a strange voice on the radio one night, whispering your name, remember these stories, because now you're part of the vault. Stay safe, stay aware, and as always, the vault awaits your return.